Today, 3 chefs and their respective beef bourguignon recipes are in a cage match. We got ourselves a cage match. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to my home. It's the season for hearty beef stew for sure, in red wine with mushrooms, onions, maybe some bacon. It's the season for beef, nay, Boeuf Bourguignon. Let's bring over our contestants. Choose your fighter. Choose your chef. Who we got? Julia Child. If Julia is known for any recipe on this earth, it is her beef bourguignon. So that's perfect. We got TK, Chef Thomas Keller, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to carve out plenty of time to make this one happen. And the late, great Anthony Bourdain, someone that I definitely admire and miss in this world. Actually, I'm kind of a fan. Miss Old Tony. But we're gonna have a level playing field today, whether that's fair or not. It is a video, so I'm gonna make each one of these recipes, see how it goes, and this is gonna be a Boeuf Bourguignon cage match for the ages. First up, Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Take off your jacket, stay a while. Okay, you know what? You hear the words Boeuf Bourguignon. At least where I'm living, you think Julia Child, and vice versa. They're synonymous with each other. You know, it's obviously a French recipe that she made famous over here. And it's delicious. I've made it a few times, a few years ago now, so I've come a long way, and I'm gonna make it again. So as is the case with most famous dishes, there are more ways than one to arrive at a good Boeuf Bourguignon. Carefully done and perfectly flavored, is certainly one of the most delicious beef dishes concocted by man. Put a period on that sentence. We got bacon, big slab of it. You know, as much as the United States loves their bacon, this is surprisingly difficult to find in this form. You know, it's bacon without it being sliced. So, you know, I'll go to butcher shop looking for it, and if I find it, I consider that a good day. 6 ounces of slab bacon. This first step might get the comments going, but I'm gonna remove the rind. That's what Julia says. So I need to cut these into lardons, which are like almost like a matchstick. 1/2 inch wide and 1.5 inches long. To confirm, to confirm. Now a step that comes up in many of Julia's recipes because of the time it was printed, and something that's not always necessary, but I find it necessary today, is to simmer the bacon, and that's because this is smoked bacon of the Black Forest variety, and I don't really want it to be. I want to remove that vibe to it, or at least subdue it. Into the simmering water, 10 minutes. So while that bacon's simmering away, we're prep our vegetables. So an onion, carrot, sliced. Yes. Kind of like that. Julia has her preferences of what kind of beef cut you want to use. In the cookbook, she says one thing, in the TV show, she says another. Rump roast in the book, chuck on her show. That's her first choice. And she seems very passionate about her choice on the show. So yeah, we're going with chuck. We're going chuck. And you gotta dry this thing completely or it's not gonna brown correctly. It's gonna steam, and you don't want it to steam. You want a nice brown crust all over it. Okay, so I gotta cut this into 2-inch cubes, but when Julia does this on her show, she's fairly liberal with the whole thing. I don't wanna be too liberal, but I do want nice big chunks of this stuff in my stew. Tell me that's 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, 2-inch cube. Look at that fat right there and there. I have confidence that when we're slow cooking this, it's all gonna cook down and turn into delicious flavors. I don't really see a need to remove all of it, but if you're looking at that, you're like, I want it gone. Well, then remove it. New Jamie says yes to fat. Dutch oven is gonna be my best friend today. 1 tablespoon of olive oil. You could use any sort of cooking oil, but on the show, Julia specifically shouts out olive oil. On a moderate heat, bacon. Light browning here, 2 to 3-ish minutes. Get it on a plate or something, and you gotta keep all the bacon fat and the oil in there. Double check that this beef is all dry before I add it in. Into the bacon fat and the oil it goes. Now Julia just kind of keeps moving it around while it's in here. You just want to ensure that each side has browned nicely. Do not crowd the pan. It's gonna take a few minutes per side, but I'm really trying to put my best foot forward here today for this cage match. So if sides of the beef still look gray, they're not leaving the pan. That's a promise. Once you've removed the first batch, add some more, and we're done. Sliced onions and carrots now go into the fat, and sauteing the vegetables until they have browned. She says to remove the sauteing fat. As you can see here, it's all just stuck to the vegetables. So can't justify that move. So we're gonna add the beef back in and the bacon. And let's add in a hoot of pepper, otherwise known as a 1/4 teaspoon, and a teaspoon of salt. This is gonna really turn things up a notch. I got 2 tablespoons of flour. This is the first time I'm ever doing this step because last time I was following both the cookbook and Julia's TV show. And in the cookbook, it mentions adding flour, but in the show, she skips the step. She must have forgot. So in turn, I forgot. Well, I'm not forgetting this time. I'm pretty excited to do it. Sprinkle it in. Okay, you got that all covered in the flour? Good. Off goes the heat. I'm gonna leave this uncovered. It's gonna go into the oven, 450 degrees Fahrenheit. After 4 minutes, you toss the beef around. Back it goes for another 4 minutes. So that's gonna brown the flour and give the beef a light crust. Mission accomplished. Check out what's going on over here. I've picked up a collection of wine to cover my ass for all the recipes. This is a little more than I need, but I wanted selection. And I wanted to make sure that, well, each recipe calls for something different. So for Julia's, I need a full-bodied young red wine. That rules out the Pinot. So I'm left with Bordeaux. Wise man once said, don't cook with a wine. Wise man, wise woman once said, don't cook with a wine that you wouldn't drink. So you're opting for a wine that isn't the least expensive, something that is, well, this is like $20. So it's, you know, I drink it. I drink $20 wine. Now, when it comes to wine tasting, I'm still working on it, but it's on the immature side of things. But I can tell when something is full-bodied and robust. I'm adding in 3 cups worth of this wine. That's the whole bottle. There. We also need beef stock. 2 to 3 cups worth, or enough to just barely cover the beef. And I have beef stock from my French onion soup video. I made enough to go around for hopefully all the recipes today. So enough beef stock to cover the beef, just barely. Homemade beef stock for the win. That was still frozen a little bit, that's okay. And around a tablespoon of tomato paste, 2 cloves of garlic mashed. Don't leave any garlic left behind. 1 crumbled up bay leaf, but this is dried, so it's kind of gonna break a bit, so just kind of be careful when you do that. Cool. Of course, I won't be driving, so 2. And around half a teaspoon of thyme. Just a moment for one last ingredient that I somehow missed. I got problems reading, so I'm just prepping that now. I'll let you know what it is in 1, 2. Blanched bacon blanched bacon rind from earlier. Now I am going to remove this in the end before I serve, so that is 4 pieces. Remember, I'm adding 4 pieces of bacon rind. Once that sucker's simmering, on goes the lid. Into the oven it goes, 2.5 to 3 hours. In the lower third part of the oven, 325 degrees F. So we're going to move on to a couple things, if you don't mind. First up, brown braised onion. So hold out your hand. There you go. 1 pearl onion, 2 pearl onions. You may come across in life pearl onions that need to be peeled. These ones do not, thankfully, because I didn't really feel like doing it. But if you had to peel your pearl onions, what you do is just drop them into simmering water for 20 seconds or something. You pop them out and peelable. But this is done. Skillet. So on like a medium heat, 1.5 tablespoons of butter, 1.5 tablespoons of oil. Once that butter's foaming, drop in the onions. Keep them moving and saute for 10 minutes. Keep rolling the onions, but be careful not to break their skin. Pour in 1/2 cup of beef stock, seasoned. So salt, pep, 4 parsley sprigs, and a couple sprigs of thyme. If I was driving, 1 bay leaf, but I'm not. 2, cover, turn the heat down, simmer slowly for 40 to 50 minutes. We're gonna move on to our mushrooms. We gotta saute these, not all these. These are for all these recipes, but I need half a pound worth. Pretty good looking mushrooms, eh? Well, I had to wash them. They were filthy when I bought them. I washed them last night. Oh, I rinsed them. I'm just gonna explain to you really quickly what I did, and it was last night. Julia says to wash your mushrooms very quickly. I rinsed them, and then I dried them, and then I dried them again. Oh, so clean. Thomas Keller's recipe requires all these little mushrooms right here. So I need to be strategic with divvying this out. I only can use the big ones. I got a quarter of them. Pick a pan. Tablespoon of butter, tablespoon of oil. Similar to the onions here, once the butter starts foaming, add in the mushrooms. I gotta toss it, I gotta shake it for 4 to 5 minutes. Initially, when you look at the mushrooms, you can see that they have absorbed all the fat because it's where did it all go? But after a few minutes, it's gonna reappear on the surface of these things. It's like magic. That's for me. Yes. Okay, I've waited, I've been patient. It has been 3 hours. Yeah, I waited the full 3. Whew. This meat is done when you can pierce it easily with a fork. Whoa. You need a saucepan. And a sieve. Hallelujah. Great, so I need to, yeah, I'm gonna just put the contents into a bowl. I gotta clean out my Dutch oven. Remove some of the bacon rind, the longer pieces, as well as the bay leaves. Everything else is invited to the party. Mushrooms go in. Keep those pearl onions intact, but only removing the onions from this pan. Bring the sauce over here. Letting this simmer for 2 to 3 minutes and skimming the fat as necessary, but Julia's been known to say, unless you're on a fat-free diet, leave some of the fat in there because it's flavor, baby. She didn't say the baby, I said the baby. But I got this to the consistency I was looking for, which is not too thin, not too thick, and it coats the back of the spoon lightly. Over top it goes, and then simmer for a few more minutes. Make sure it's covered. Very important, just to make sure the seasoning is on point one last time. What's going on with it? Tremendous things. Oi, that's hot. To your left, conveniently, some chopped parsley goes on the very top, like so. Order up! Part 1. It's one of those dishes where you can't really decide how you're gonna eat it. Knife, fork, spoon, or the trio. It's good to have that on standby. What we've done in the past with these cage matches, one other time, is I create a score for both technique and flavor. I've jotted those down on my little tablet here, along with any additional notes, all my thoughts spewed onto this page here. Will not reveal that to you right now because we got 2 other dishes to make and maybe a nap as well. Next up is Anthony Bourdain's Les Halls cookbook. Kidding, of course, it's Les Halles cookbook. I don't believe I gave Anthony Bourdain a proper introduction on the show, even though he doesn't need one. But yeah, he's once a chef, author, host to some pretty awesome TV travel shows, among other things. And this cookbook here is named after the restaurant that he used to be an executive chef at, Les Halles, which was hop, skip, and a jump that away here in New York. Tony's Beef Bourg, let's do this. Traditionally, this dish is cooked entirely with red wine, and that's fine. just fine. But if you listened to me earlier and keep a stash of good strong demi-glace kicking around in your freezer, a couple spoonfuls give the sauce a nice... That's Thomas Keller's Boeuf Bourguignon. Okay. I'm filming this video kind of out of order. A couple spoonfuls give the sauce a nice flavor boost. This is one of the easiest dishes in this book and also one of the best. So, you didn't hear the oven, right? That's supposed to be kept a secret. That one happens after this one. So, let's all pretend you didn't hear the oven. Here we go again. 2-pound paleron of beef, aka chicken steak. That's what he says here. He says check the glossary if you're confused, and I was confused at one point. A paleron is a noble, flavorful, and relatively tender cut from the shoulder of beef, inexplicably called the chicken steak. That's what this is. It's chuck roast, which is part of the shoulder of the beef. Similar to Julia's, we gotta cut this into 1.5-inch pieces. 1.5 by 1.5. I mean, at this point in time, you kind of know what you're after, just kind of larger cube shapes. Season the beef and a little salt on the cutting board. That will come in handy so I don't have to wash my hands. Pepper. There's so much reserved salt and pepper on the cutting board, just kind of slop it all up. Sliced onions. Cut the carrot into 1-inch pieces, and then according to the photo, he also does this. Look who's back, Dutch oven. And I gotta get this onto a high heat. There you go. And I'm gonna add in a 1/4 cup of olive oil, although I should be more precise than just winging it. In a few seconds here. Dirtied up a couple things for that. I could have just eyeballed that. Browning the meat on all sides, but not crowding the pan. Even Anthony's shouting at me. He says, in batches, caps lock, not all at once. Definitely do not want the sides grayed until they're well browned. In order to get a nice brown on this, you need to ensure that the heat is up high, but when it's up high, it's like the 4th of July in there, so you just kind of have to keep your distance because that shit stings. Yeah, okay. Okay, once all that beef's out of there, I'm gonna turn the heat down to a medium. So since I'm filming these recipes slightly out of order, the Thomas Keller recipe right now is in the fridge. There's a bit of an onion shortage. I miscounted by 1. So instead of all yellow onions, I had to use a red onion. Forgive me. Besides the pleasant appearance of a red onion, I Googled that when you're doing something like what I'm doing, it's all gonna kind of be fairly similar anyway. So 4 thinly sliced onions. In they go. Honestly, it's just things like this that happen when you're cooking at home, so you just kind of embrace it. Everyone is okay, I hope. Fingers crossed. All right, this is gonna take around 10 minutes, but I gotta get these onions soft and golden brown. A couple tablespoons of flour. Cook the flour with the onions for 2 to 3 minutes. Tony's recipe is calling for a different wine than the one that we were using for Julia's, where Anthony says you need 1 cup of red Burgundy. And Burgundy is Pinot Noir, so it's not full bodied. It's like a medium body wine, which means it's not as robust. 1 cup, not a full bottle or anything. Get that in there to deglaze the pan, scrape up any of that fond. Look how much that's thickened up, holy. Once the wine is up to a boil, in goes the beef. 6 carrots, 1 garlic clove, but he doesn't say anything about crushing it, he just says garlic clove. I'm gonna crush it. Enough water to cover everything by 1/3. Would that be like a ratio of 3 parts liquid to 2 parts meat? Thank you for clarifying that. I would say 2 parts meat, 3 parts liquid. Okay, I think so. I got an herb bouquet here of a parsley sprig, a few sprigs of thyme, and a bay leaf. 2 bay leaves. It's gonna go in there. And he said at the beginning, a good strong demi-glace. If you have one hanging out in your freezer, use it. Well, I do. So a couple spoonfuls of it. Demi-glace. This is actually a veal demi-glace. So interesting development going on over here. I'm skimming the foam and the scum that rises to the surface. And while I'm doing so, I also end up skimming off all the little pieces of crushed garlic that are also rising to the surface. So as a result, I think I have skimmed almost all of the garlic out of there, which is no good. And that's probably why he didn't really specify doing what I exactly did. So I think I'm gonna add a whole garlic clove. At the end, I'll remove that with the bouquet. So I gotta turn that down to a simmer, and he says it's gonna take around 2 hours. And you know what we're looking for. That meat needs to be tender enough that you can just break it apart with a fork. So that's the goal, and if it takes longer than 2 hours, it takes longer than 2 hours. He says check. He also, where are my things? He says check every 15 to 20 minutes, like that nothing is burning at the bottom of the pan. God forbid, scorching. Making sure that you're checking the seasoning and that it's properly balanced. Cool? Anything that's rising to the surface that you don't want it there, you remove. I'm gonna do the fork test here. So if it can be pierced easily and you think it's gonna be able to break apart with a fork, it's good. So this is after a total, I'm gonna say around 3 hours braising away. So the same amount of time as Julia's. A little more salt, definitely need more salt. Throw in a little pepper there for good luck. I gotta remove the herb bouquet. And then that whole piece of garlic, I was just gonna, yeah, I don't know where that is. Where's that piece of garlic? Add chopped parsley to the pot and serve. Chopped parsley. Order up! Part 2. And in conclusion, that's what I think of that. So we are gonna move on to, well, we got one more. We got one more. Finally, Thomas Keller's Bourdain cookbook. When it comes to a Chef Thomas Keller recipe, there's lots going on. It's quite descriptive, lots of ingredients, things to remember, things to follow. It's a novel. Since I've made a few of these, I found that you just gotta put your best foot forward and at least get started, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we got a rhythm to this thing now. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, because it can be just intimidating AF. Chef Thomas Keller has restaurants around the country. In the US, of the Michelin star variety. This one in particular, Bourdain, has 1 Michelin star, I believe. Fact check me, Jamie. It's a French bistro type vibe to it, and obviously this cookbook holds all those recipes that they use at that restaurant. The primary techniques for Bourdain's Boeuf Bourguignon are those of refinement, removing the impurities at every opportunity. Gulp. Let's make it happen. Starting with the red wine reduction. Wash your leeks. He wanted me to dice and slice my vegetables specific sizes. 1 cup of sliced onions, 1 cup of diced carrots, 1 cup of sliced shallot, 1 cup of sliced leek, the white and light green part of it, 1 cup of sliced mushrooms, 3 thyme sprigs, 3 parsley sprigs, 3 cloves of unpeeled garlic that have been crushed, and a 1/4 teaspoon of black peppercorn. And of course, 1 bottle of red wine, such as a Cabernet Sauvignon, similar to what Julia wanted us to add, which is a full-bodied red. In goes 1 bottle. On goes the lid. Get this to a boil. And then once it is, reduce the heat down to a simmer for 45 to 50 minutes. There's the beef. Boneless short rib, to be precise, much different cut than Julia's and Anthony's recipes. At Bourdain, we use meat from the ribs for Boeuf Bourguignon because of its excellent marbling and succulence.
2.75 pounds is 1,247.38 grams.
Parfait. Trim away excess fat. I do not see any. Actually, just nice marbling. You know it's serious business when I reach for the green measuring tape. I just want, you know, it's all about refinement and precision today. 1.5 to 2 inches long of pieces. So that would be, we just need a template to get us started. There you go. So let's just repeat. And then a thickness of 1 inch, but the thickness is out of my control because when I bought these, this is how it looks. So that is just under 1 inch thick. So I hope that's cool with you, Thomas. It's cool with me. Seasoning each side of the beef. Start with some kosher salt, freshly cracked pepper. And I think there's enough on the cutting board there that I can just kind of slop up the rest. Both sides. Baking sheet with paper towel. Red wine reduction reduced down to a glaze. I think so. Off the heat for now. My favorite pan. And let's get a high heat going on that. Fill the bottom of this pan with 1/8 of an inch of canola oil. Once that oil is hot enough, browning the sides of the beef. Same deal as always. Do not crowd the pan. The difference is that we have 1/8 of an inch of canola oil on the bottom of this, so it's like we're almost deep frying this. Interesting. Watch out for the oil splashing in your face, arms, and everywhere else. 5 minutes in total, brown on all sides, onto the paper towel lined baking sheet. This book was miles away from the pan while I was browning the meat, but splashing from here all the way over here is incredible feat. Every one of his recipes, there always seems to be some sort of leak involved. But it's very, very important just through experience to always make sure that there's no sand, dirt, grit in the leek. Make sure it's washed, rinsed, repeat, and then let it soak and have all that stuff sink to the bottom of the bowl, because that can ruin a dish, and it has ruined a few of my dishes. I've had a few dishes where I was taking a bite, I was like, if I had only washed the leeks, because it ruins it. Of course, when you're draining them, just don't, dump the water through the strainer. I lifted it out of the bowl and into the strainer. That way you're just not pouring all that crap back onto the leeks. In with the red wine reduction. That's like all those vegetables in there. I'm adding even more vegetables to mix together with the vegetables, and it's, yeah, okay. So 2/3 cup of sliced carrot, 1 cup of diced yellow onion, 1.5 cups of sliced leek, 3 Italian parsley sprigs, 3 sprigs of thyme, 2 crushed and unpeeled garlic cloves, 2 bay leaves. However, in the red wine reduction, I was also supposed to add bay leaves. Completely forgot. I was supposed to add 2 of them. So there they are. We're not driving tonight. Total of 4 bay leaves to make up for the lack of bay leaves in the other thing. Okay. What am I doing? The thing with this freaking book, the whole layout of this book is a pain in the ass, quite honestly, because you have the ingredients all here, and it's like you have to memorize these before you go on to the other page, or you're just going back and forth, back and forth. So that's the situation I'm in, because I want to stay here, but I have to keep going here. And this book's hanging out in this stupid thing, so it's, it's this photo's fault. As pretty as this photo is, it's just getting in the damn way. So, book problems, So I need to cut a piece of just a sec. Cut a piece of cheesecloth that is 4 inches larger than the diameter of this pot. Okay, done. Wet the cheesecloth, wring it dry, place the cloth over the vegetables, and fold over the edges to form a nest. Place the short ribs on the cheesecloth. And then with my homemade beef stock, I gotta pour in enough to come just to the top of the meat. It is important that the liquid doesn't evaporate too quickly. Totally agree. If the pot does not have a tight fitting lid, oh, it does. I got one right here. The oven has been preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm gonna add this, of course, and then I'm gonna turn the oven temperature down to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Bring that up to a simmer, medium-high heat. Just make sure that the cheesecloth doesn't catch on fire. None of it is draped over a flame. That would be bad. Great. Braise the beef for an hour and a half to 2 hours or until the meat is very tender. Well, in order to get it very tender, I had to make a judgment call. 3 hours in total. So the same amount of time that I gave Julia Child's Boeuf Bourguignon, I have given it to this one. Oi! Nice. I think it's just like the way that the beef is situated on the very top. It took longer for it to braise and become tender. I was watching, it was submerged in the liquid, but still. At the end of the day though, what the hell do I know? Lift up the cheesecloth. And do that and fix what you just did. Burn your hand a little bit. Struggle, and then lift it back up again. Into the other container. I don't need anything but the beef, cheesecloth. Your job here is done. Look how easy the fork pierces that beef. Oh yeah. Sieve me, and a bowl. You gave me the option, great. A very fine strainer, and then I have a typical sieve strainer. I think this is gonna work. I don't know, that's probably way too fine. So you gotta strain it a second time into a saucepan. And I was mentioning that I have this very fine strainer. Why don't we use this? Yeah, that works nicely, very nicely. The carrot got in there and everything. Okay, bring the liquid to a boil. These vegetables, they're lifeless. All the good stuff is in that sauce, so we're gonna get rid of that. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying. And then while it's boiling, removing any fat that floats to the surface. Thomas Keller preached refinement at the beginning of this recipe, so this is what I was thinking. I've strained this sauce 3 times now. I have degreased it, removed as much fat as I could, but there is just a little bit that remains. So I've poured it into my fat separator. I'm just gonna let this cool for a bit, and then I will pour that into the vessel with the beef. Whatever fat is remaining in here stays in here. That broth is crystal clear and brown. All 3 Boeuf Bourguignon dishes mention how good, if not better, the dish is the next day. TK's is the only one that specifically has it written into the recipe to let this rest in the fridge for a day up to 3 days. So I'm gonna stick to it for TK's only. The other 2 I ate in the moment. So something to consider when we're grading and scoring the final dishes. Just keep it in the back of your head. You know, I want this to be fair. Home stretch, home stretch, home stretch. Keep telling yourself that. Okay, hi everyone, it's the next day. Believe it or not, yes, I am wearing a black t-shirt. It's a different black t-shirt. Potatoes, carrots, lardons, pearl onions, mushrooms. 8 ounces of fingerling potatoes. If they're less than 1 ounce, you can leave them whole. You don't peel them, but you should wash them. Cutting them into 1/2-inch thick slices. And he goes lengthwise. Cool. So I'm gonna place these in a saucepan, along with a tablespoon of salt, black peppercorns. I know that's only around like 4-ish, 4 or 5. Time for some 2 thyme sprigs. That joke was so lame, I didn't even want to finish it. Now he says you're gonna need 1 bay leaf, 2 bay leaves, 2 garlic cloves, skin left on and smushed. This book is getting on my freaking nerve. Water into the saucepan. Cover the potatoes by at least 1 inch. Boil this. Okay, once that's up to a boil, simmer for 10 to 15 till those taters are tender. In the recipe, he says you need 16 round baby carrots. Like, I couldn't find round carrots and I looked it up online and it is a thing. It's like a specialty item. I couldn't get my hands on it. So I just picked up carrots, kind of look like, I just picked up carrots that are like this. And what I'm gonna do is just find the smallest ones out of these bunches. It's a hell of a lot of carrots, but we'll do this and see where it takes us. Carefully peel them. Trim the tops, leaving a 1/4 inch attached. A 1/4 inch attached. 1/4 inch attached. I think the very tip here has to go. I'm gonna make a call. With a paring knife, scrape the tops of the carrots to remove any of the skin that remains. Okay, you just want to make it look like it's from a Michelin star restaurant in your own kitchen for purposes that you'll never really figure out. But you do it because you're following a recipe. Something that makes sense at a fancy restaurant, I'm sure. But when you're alone in your kitchen, I don't know, it's got psychopath vibes. And then we split the carrots in half lengthwise. Another saucepan. Carrots go in. Similar to the potatoes, tablespoon of salt, tablespoon of black peppercorns, 2 sprigs of thyme, 2 bay leaves. Yeah, the joke writes itself at this point. 2 unpeeled garlic cloves, smushed. Cover with 1.5 inches of water, and it's gonna take the potatoes' place. Bring it to a boil, reduce the heat, and simmer for 4 to 5 minutes. So drain the potatoes, discard the herbs, and just move them to a plate. Exciting news, everyone. We've come full circle back to the slab of bacon. So the lardon is gonna be the length of the bacon here, and then 3/8 of an inch thick each. With Julia's recipe, she said to cut the skin off, but there's no mention of that with his, so I'm just gonna leave it on. And remember that this is Black Forest smoke bacon, so I do wanna get rid of that. You guys simmer it. That's the carrots. Are they tender? Answer is yes, they are. Drain the carrots, transfer to a plate to cool. Discard seasoning. Consider it done. Now I am developing chef fingers through this cage match, so yeah, as hot as it is, it don't hurt on the inside. He says if you have a non-stick baking pan, get the lardon on there. So I'm gonna get these into my oven. Remember, I preheated that until they're richly browned. Richly? Richly browned. Richly browned, huh. So after 10 minutes in the oven, I gotta flip these lardons and then do another 10 minutes. I think that's richly browned. It's just, yeah, it's every little detail that went so smoothly with the other recipes. It's just like they've all been separated here, and it just turns into a marathon. So Julia's recipe had the white pearl onions. Remember that? Well, Thomas always has to be different. He's bringing in the red pearl onions to go along with the white. So double onions means double saucepans. It says cook the red onions separately from the other onions as they will discolor them. Enough water to cover the onions by at least 1 inch. So a bay leaf each. The joke is past its prime in this video. We are overspending in the peppercorn department for this recipe. So 1 thyme sprig there, 1 thyme sprig there, some kosher salt. How much? You be the boss. Bring it to a boil. Each to a boil. I'm gonna reduce the heat down to a simmer for 10 to 15. Tender. Okay, so basically drain all the water but 2 tablespoons out of these saucepans. In with the white onions, I need to add in 2 teaspoons of Chardonnay vinegar. Sorry, champagne vinegar. This is white wine vinegar. Yeah, in with the red onions, 2 teaspoons of red wine vinegar. Get that all, yeah. Good job, everyone. Now I need to move on to these 32 small button mushrooms. I do have big mushrooms in here, but there's also smaller ones. I specifically bought some smaller mushrooms. What's in my collection here? They seem smaller in the store, quite honestly. Trim away the mushroom stems flush with the caps. Here, we haven't used a lot of butter in these recipes, I don't think, right? There's 2 tablespoons. So once that butter foam starts to subside, in go the mushrooms. Reduce the heat to medium-low. Salt and pepper. Tossing often, I'm gonna cook these gently until the mushrooms have lightly browned. A big smile on my face while I finish these mushrooms, because that's the last of the garnishes that have been prepared, I think. So I'm gonna go back to the fridge here, and go grab my beef bourguignon, or at least what's the start of it. This has been in the fridge for over 24 hours at this point, but I'm gonna remove that layer of fat that's nestled so gently on the very top. It's pretty remarkable how little fat is actually in this thing. If this stock became gelatinous overnight, which it didn't, he says to have this go into the oven for a few minutes to liquefy the stock. Are you ready for one last trip? I need to carefully remove the beef, one at a time here, into the Dutch oven. Let's strain our sauce, right, Thomas? Strain the liquid over the beef. I'm bringing out my inner Thomas right now and skimming out any remaining fat that's in there that I can find. It's a 400-degree oven, and I'm gonna get this in there for 5 minutes, basting occasionally with the cooking liquid. I don't know how warm that got. It didn't do anything. I'm gonna keep this in for another few minutes. Okay, if it's warm, we're good. Let's add the potatoes. Okay, add the carrots with no herbs attached to them. Let's get those mushrooms in. Oh, the onions. 12 pearl onions each. You can save the rest. Toss it gently, but do not toss it so much that you break the beef up. Because they're not the round baby carrots he was asking for, they're different carrots. I'm gonna remove a few of them. I just feel like there's too much carrot action going in there. Back into the oven for 5 to 10 minutes, or until the vegetables and the beef are hot. I have a feeling it's gonna take more than 10 minutes. So reheat the lardons. I got those on standby. I'd say it's around 15 minutes. Yes, yes, yes. Order up, part 3. With my slotted spoon, I'm gonna divide the vegetables and the meat into this bowl as evenly as I can. Switch to an actual spoon now and spoon over some of the broth. Distribute some lardons on top. I'm supposed to add the parsley when I took it out of the oven, so I'm gonna just sneakily add some in now. Okay, sneaky, just get it into the broth. Don't tell Thomas I did this, okay? Sprinkle with a little fleur de sel. And honestly, it's just too perfect a moment not to say it again, so can I get an order up? TK says to serve with some Dijon mustard. Just a little, because I don't know what the hell's gonna happen. Make sure you try every combination here, just to make sure. You don't want to leave anything out. What a journey. Let's do this. Let's review, shall we? But keep in mind, firstly, these are my own thoughts. I just jotted everything down immediately after I ate each bowl. So, who am I? I'm some punk-ass guy in his kitchen filming himself try to be a home cook. Who are they? 3 immensely talented people who have created 3 great Boeuf Bourguignon recipes. And, I tried to do the best I could, followed along as closely as I could, but I'm not a perfect home cook, and home cooking isn't perfect. Take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. We're gonna start in the order of which we started. So Julia Child. And for flavor and for technique, Julia Child. 10s across the board. It was perfect. It is a very straightforward and easy to follow recipe. I feel like any sort of skill level can make something wonderful out of that recipe. And when it's a Julia Child recipe, and I can say that, that means something. Rich, dark consistency of that sauce, it's like gravy-like. Then there's like this wine and beef flavor just like running through everything. Obviously the beef was just tender AF, just like falls apart, just like beautifully. And you know, she doesn't shy away from the fat. There's lots of fatty goodness going on in there, and fat, as I have learned, means flavor. Although you're preparing the mushrooms and the onions separately, you do that while the thing is braising. So you're not like wasting any time or anything like that. And you know, just all comes together. Flawless flavors. Now, speaking personally, I've made this recipe a few times now. And speaking personally, everything about this video is personal. But yeah, speaking personally, the first time I made this recipe, I wasn't like a big meat eater or beef eater before it, and I would eat hamburgers or chicken or something like that. But this recipe opened up the floodgates. I didn't really think you could just like do these kinds of things at home and then taste so good. I don't know, I was just kind of oblivious to the whole thing. So when I made it for the first time, just blew my mind. In conclusion, I would say that is a lightning in a bottle recipe from old Julia. Shall we move on? Next up, Anthony Bourdain for flavor and technique. 7s, 7 out of 10 each. I found this one was just missing that je ne sais quoi, you know, that little something special there. And that could have done a lot with me, following what Anthony was saying in terms of like how long to braise that on the stovetop. He said 2 hours, I went for 3+, and I still thought you could push it longer. It's just something about like having it on the stove with the lid off, rather than like Julia's was in the oven, right, with the lid on, and you take it out and you just reveal this thing and it's just big. Where this one just was missing that little piece to it. It was a good beef stew, but I couldn't really pick up the Boeuf Bourguignon aspect of it. And maybe that's just because I was only adding the 1 cup of the Pinot. Positives, it's like a Boeuf Bourguignon Express sort of thing. Quickest to prepare, least amount of mess, quickest to make, and I still had a really good beef stew in front of me. And I think Anthony Bourdain would be the first person to ask why he's being matched up against these 2 other people. That's fair, but it's because of YouTube. I probably should have made it first because I ate it immediately after Julia Child's Boeuf Bourguignon, and that one was a juggernaut. So I guess Anthony's didn't really stand a chance in hindsight. That's my bad, again. Finally, our previous cage match winner, Thomas Keller. I don't think his recipe was meant to be made in a home kitchen. So scoring it as a recipe that I just made in my kitchen, well, it's gotta be done. Let's go with technique first. So if we're in his restaurant, let's just give it a 10 out of 10. What the hell does it matter? I'm not gonna make it. But if I'm making it at home, 6 out of 10. All those individual garnishes that you have to prepare by themselves, just all that time, it just adds up. And then you're skimming and straining that sauce so many times that it's just like naked. And just naked of all its fat. I'm convinced it's not a recipe for home cooking. However, for flavor, 8.5 out of 10. Very tasty, and each component that you had to cook separately and focus on separately, it all pays off because they're all perfect. It's just that attention to detail that makes it that much better with, like, say, the potatoes, the carrots, the onions, the beef, the sauce. It all shines. The beef was probably the most tender of all 3 recipes. But it's just like, was this recipe missing that one feeling that a beef stew really gives? You know, it's supposed to wrap around you like a warm hug. And I don't know if it offered that. Now that the scores are officially in, we're giving it to Julia. She's now set a new cage match world record, 10s across the board, and she really needed this win. She didn't win the cage match last time.
And then you want to swirl it and you smell it.
That's it. That's all. This was Jamie and Julia and Anthony and TK. Bon appetit.